Hello and welcome. I'm Kristen Titus, Executive Director of the Cognizant US Foundation. Thank you for joining us to kick off a series of discussions on building a lifelong learning system, a roadmap for cities, the latest report from the Aspen Institute's Future of Work initiative. This report is the culmination of a year-long partnership between the Aspen Institute and the Cognizant US Foundation. At the foundation, we work to inspire, educate, and prepare people of all ages for the jobs of today and tomorrow. And we're thrilled to support this research that has the opportunity to shape public policy, influence workforce and education systems, and bring together the many stakeholders building lifelong learning systems in cities across the country. A recent World Economic Forum report forecasts that 50% of the world's employees will need reskilling by 2025. And more than half of all employed adults believe it's essential to pursue new training to stay competitive in today's workforce. And we know that the key to economic mobility is not only having access to a quality job, but having access to the continuing education and training necessary to succeed in that job. This is paramount to a successful lifelong learning system. As a corporate foundation, we know the important role businesses play in enabling lifelong learning. Through Cognizant's Center for the Future of Work, its Academies program, and its many philanthropic investments around the globe, Cognizant's working to ensure its employees and partners have the necessary education and skills to stay relevant in a changing digital economy. Now, amidst the COVID economic recovery, helping people find employment, re-enter the labor market, or develop new skills, this has become even more urgent. Building equitable and accessible lifelong learning systems is critical to help workers advance in their careers. As we navigate the impacts of COVID-19, cities have the opportunity to leverage the collective power of employers, education institutions, policymakers, and local organizations to build a resilient and competitive workforce. This research helps shine a light on the path forward. And our event today brings together the leaders on the front lines in cities across the country. I'd like to hand it over to Zach Newman, a co-author of the report, share more about the report's findings and the path forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Kristen, for that introduction and for your engagement and the support of the Cognizant Foundation. And thanks to all of you who've joined for today's webinar. My name is Zach Newman. I'm the Senior Project Manager at the Aspen Institute's Future of Work initiative and the lead author of our new report on how cities can build lifelong learning systems. I'm excited to be here today and to talk about our report and to hear from some experts from around the country about what they're doing on the ground to make the lifelong learning agenda a reality. The world looked much different when we started work on this report almost a year and a half ago. The challenges workers face have only increased, and the need for cities to develop solutions that meet these challenges has become even more pronounced than it was when we first started the work. Even before COVID hit, US labor markets were undergoing a dramatic change. Globalization and technological advancements are changing long-standing industries, impacting the wages, opportunities, and career trajectories of millions of American workers. As technology and global economic investments have changed labor markets, the skills required by employers have changed as well, with a large and growing demand for digital skills. This phenomenon has been especially pronounced in cities, where the changing demand for talent has reduced middle wage jobs for workers. Workers will need to update their skills to thrive in America's changing economy. However, the current education system is primarily built to deliver pre-career training rather than ongoing skill development. For workers who need to develop new skills to advance their careers, the absence of continuous training options can be extremely limiting. Cities must embrace this challenge and begin the difficult work of building lifelong learning systems that can help adult workers. This means providing opportunities to continuously develop and improve the knowledge and skills needed for employment. Cities are uniquely positioned to take on this work. First, they have the resources to deliver against the broad promise of lifelong learning, with access to universities, community colleges, employers, nonprofit trainers, and access to wraparound services. Secondly, cities are able, better than almost anyone else, to convene essential stakeholders, coordinate resources, and respond specifically to the needs of workers and learners. Finally, cities are closer to states or the federal government to their local labor markets. Their proximity to what jobs are being created and how labor markets are changing can help ensure that continuous training opportunities are locally tailored and serve the ever-changing needs of the community. To build effective lifelong learning systems, cities have to answer 4 key questions. And in many ways, our report was designed to begin this conversation. The first is, what does a supportive, equitable, lifelong learning system actually look like in cities? Second, what are the new innovative approaches to worker learning and training that are being deployed in the US right now that cities can draw on? Third, what are the major obstacles to building lifelong learning systems in cities? And then 4, how can cities leverage existing resources to build viable lifelong learning systems? In other words, what are the resources that cities have access to and can use to begin this work? To answer these questions, we convened city leaders from Hartford, Chicago, and Phoenix to better understand the work they're doing to lay the foundation for lifelong learning. In many ways, these cities couldn't be more different. Phoenix is the fastest growing city in the United States. The economy has benefited from an influx of new companies, and the labor market is changing quickly. Chicago has long been an iconic American city with dozens of Fortune 500 companies and a stable population. While it has world-class universities and an innovative community college system, engaged employers, and an active philanthropic network, the city has struggled with trying to create broad-based prosperity for all of its residents. Finally, Hartford is a small East Coast city. Like Chicago and Phoenix, it's diverse. It also benefits from high-quality education and training providers. However, unlike Phoenix, it is not a fast-growing city, but it does have long-established companies in the finance and insurance industries. As mentioned, each of these cities, while different sizes and from varying parts of the country, share similar resources. Each of them has high-quality community colleges, 4-year colleges and universities, and employers who are committed to investing in the community, dedicated nonprofits that function both as trainers and service providers, and deep mayoral commitment to supporting workers. These resources are critical to building an inclusive, effective, lifelong learning system, but they're really just the beginning. Despite these assets, Hartford, Phoenix, and Chicago, and many other cities across the United States face significant challenges in building lifelong learning systems that serve workers from different backgrounds and at different stages of their lives. Our work has identified 4 main areas of challenges that cities must confront. First is providing access to reliable information to workers and learners. Second is financing education and training options. Third is addressing equity and systemic racism across the education and training system. And fourth is facilitating coordination across the training and learning landscape. In almost all respects, the presence of COVID-19 and the severe impact it's had on cities and workers has only deepened these challenges. For so many workers displaced by the virus, the road back into the workforce leads through a community college, a university, or a local training program. And yet, access to these programs will not be equal for everyone. For so many workers, understanding which program or opportunity will lead to a quality career will be a challenge. For others, both the cost and the opportunity of training will be unsustainable or make learning inaccessible. Finally, others will be held out by the racial and economic barriers that have made it harder for women and people of color to pursue training for generations. In the face of these challenges, cities are pioneering new, innovative approaches, many of which are detailed in the report being released today. First is that cities should establish leadership roles in the mayor's office. Second is that the lifelong learning system now and in the future should do everything it can to promote access, visibility, and options for workers. Third, cities should support adult workers with flexibility in services, ensuring that everyone can participate in lifelong learning no matter their background. Today, you'll hear from mayors and other city leaders on the front lines of creating lifelong learning systems. Based on our research and discussions in these cities, we are proud to release our final report, Building Lifelong Learning Systems, a roadmap for cities, that can be found on our website. To frame the report and its recommendations, we're joined by an incredibly interesting and compelling group of stakeholders. Leading us off today will be Mayor Kate Gallego of Phoenix, Arizona. She'll be followed by Luke Bronin, Mayor of Hartford, Connecticut. We'll then hear from Juan Salgado from the City Colleges of Chicago, followed by Rebecca Schmidt from Cognizant. Rick Wartzman will then lead a panel discussion featuring Duncan Harris from Capital Community College in Hartford, Connecticut, Matt Munch of P33 in Chicago, and Rachel Yanoff from Achieve 60 Arizona, based in Phoenix, Arizona. We'll then have concluding remarks from Al Fitzpaine from the Aspen Institute Future of Work Initiative. Our first speaker today is Mayor Kate Gallego. Mayor Gallego is the second elected female mayor in Phoenix history and the youngest big city mayor in the US. Before being elected to the Phoenix City Council, Mayor Gallego worked on economic development for a local utility company, Salt River Project. Mayor Gallego has focused on three key policy areas during her time in office: diversifying the economy, strengthening infrastructure investment, and working to make Phoenix a leader in sustainability. During COVID, she has worked tirelessly to slow the spread of the virus, provide direct support to community members impacted by the virus, and help Phoenicians return to work. It's my pleasure to introduce her today.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you to the Aspen Institute for taking on this important topic. It is great to be here with a strong fellow mayor as well as Chancellor Salgado. The City of Phoenix was honored to host the Aspen Institute for an in-person conversation, and we're glad to continue to participate virtually. 2020 may be one of the most important years in thinking about the future of work. Our economy is going through a very difficult transition, and we think many of the changes that have happened this year could become more permanent as we exit out of 2020 and hopefully out of the worst of COVID-19. Phoenix hopes to be on the forefront of innovation. We are the 5th largest city in the country and the fastest growing. We are continuing to grow during COVID and now are only one of the top 10 construction markets to see growth in that area. Among our fastest growing sectors have been healthcare and bioscience, including many areas not at all related to the virus. That's something we've tried to do intentionally, where we have learned from lessons of the 2008 downturn. Phoenix was very dependent on the housing industry and development in general, construction in particular, and we've tried to diversify our economy, invest in higher education, partnerships with our community college, advanced workforce training. Coming out of the 2008 recession, about 45% of our jobs were in advanced industries, and now we are at 60% and hoping to continue to grow. Among our most exciting announcements during 2020 have been several cancer-related companies that are fighting cancer and have chosen to do so in Phoenix, offering advanced therapeutics and developing them in the city of Phoenix. As someone whose family is touched by cancer, with my mom fighting it right now, that's personally meaningful to me, but also jobs at every end of the education spectrum where individuals can get good pay, fair benefits, and have the type of work-life balance as well as challenging, interesting careers that I would want for my own family. So we're excited about those life science investments. We also recently secured our largest economic development deal in city history, which is an advanced manufacturing investment from TSMC, the folks who make semiconductor chips in products such as iPhones. And they've chosen Phoenix as well, in part because of our college-educated workforce. Arizona State University in our community is the largest university in terms of the number of bachelor's degrees coming out of it, and those type of degrees are very important for the workforce of the future. We're excited about all the engineers who will be able to work and thrive in Phoenix, as well as technicians, support personnel, and the whole ecosystem, including suppliers. So we're hoping advanced manufacturing and manufacturing in general continues to be an important part of our economy in this community. At the same time, we are still a very tourism dependent community. It is pretty wonderful weather right now in Phoenix, and normally we would be seeing huge number of visitors starting this time and going all the way through spring training and our amazing lineup of events. We're very cognizant that the Centers for Disease Control is not recommending travel right now, and in trying to make sure we put in the appropriate health precautions, as well as think long-term about the future of work in industries such as hospitality. We have seen a trend towards people going away from full-service hotels towards more single-unit focused solutions, including Airbnb and other products where you stay in a single-family home. These are jobs that have solutions that have far fewer jobs associated, and so we're trying to understand how permanent some of these transitions will be. We're also seeing Amazon and other logistics-focused companies making major hires in our community and others, but they are replacing retail solutions that had a very different workforce and a much larger, less seasonal workforce. And we are wondering if people are going to go away from traditional retail environments towards these online solutions and what that means for our community as well. There's just so many transitions that have begun during COVID that we think may become permanent and will have a huge impact for our workforce. So we're trying to invest in more programs to give people opportunities to take the careers and skills they have and use them in new areas. We have great partnerships with our educational institutions, including our community colleges that are already getting a lot of support and interest. And we hope as people transition towards the jobs of the future that the city and our workforce department can be a partner. I'm honored that this week the U.S. Conference of Mayors has named me of the chair of the Jobs and Workforce Committee, and I'm hoping to take the great work that Aspen Institute and its partners have done and hopefully turn those ideas into public policy solutions that cities can use, as well as federal policy to support the workforce of the future and making sure that our communities are full of great, fulfilling jobs that we would want for all of our families. Wish you the best of luck as we continue this important conversation. It has never been more important than it is now. And I hope we can make a difference for families that are looking for someone who's willing to fight for them, as well as kids like mine who are trying to figure out what's next in the future and where those careers will be. Have a great rest of the forum. Thank you so much for including me.
Thank you, Mayor Gallego, for those remarks. It was very helpful in terms of framing the rest of the conversation. We are fortunate today to be joined by another mayor who was instrumental in the work that we did as part of our Aspen Institute report. He's the mayor of Hartford. His name is Luke Bronin, and he has worked for the state of Connecticut and also worked in the federal government. So has the ability to think about these issues from not only a local perspective, but also a state and a federal perspective. Luke, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks so much, Al. Great to be with you. Great to see you. And thanks to the Aspen Institute for doing this work.
And I promise people that we did not coordinate in terms of our beard or our shirt and jacket selection today. That just happened randomly. So let me start with the topic that is obviously front of mind for everybody, and that's the pandemic and COVID. And obviously that is changing the way we live and work and changing the industries and changing jobs. But from your perspective, sitting as the mayor of Hartford, how is the pandemic changing the city of Hartford and how are you responding to it?
You know, the pandemic has affected almost every aspect of life, and as many people have said, has exacerbated a lot of existing underlying challenges and a lot of existing underlying disparities. One of the things that the report that the Aspen Institute Future of Work study did focused on the impact on those without advanced degrees, in particular those in lower skilled jobs, and particularly in communities of color. And Hartford is a city that is 85% a community of color. And many of our residents were in those jobs that were most directly affected. So there's a profound impact economically, socially, on thousands and thousands of families throughout the city. But I think the pandemic also highlighted the need to really take a coordinated approach to help address those disparities in a meaningful way. And where right now the importance of developing accessible, discrete, stackable credentials for those for whom a college degree may have been out of reach or may be out of reach, I think should be more obvious and more apparent than ever. And I hope that's one of the lessons that we learn from this pandemic as we move past the immediate crisis.
Yeah, and so, you mentioned the pandemic is impacting low-income communities of color, and the Hartford demographic obviously you're right in the crosshairs of the pandemic. Our report, one of the participants in our discussions was the community college that you have in Hartford, Capital Community College. And one of the innovative things that they've developed is a equity resource center to begin to address these challenges and look at the needs that people have, not just to be able to go to community college, but issues around housing,
Right.
issues around affordability, transportation, and childcare. And so, obviously we saw in Hartford, as we did in Phoenix and Chicago, the importance of not just the education system, but all of the other kind of ancillary systems to education working at the same time. Obviously, those have all gotten more challenging. But in terms of trying to create equitable outcomes, the question I have for you is like, what work, can a city do to promote equity in terms of, workforce outcomes and access to some of these critical education and training opportunities that help people, who have been displaced by the pandemic or displaced by technology move into new jobs
Sure.
that offer a career pathway for them.
So let me come at that question a little bit indirectly. Hartford is a small city. We have two universities, the University of Hartford and Trinity, that are outstanding educational institutions. For us, one of the challenges that many of the graduates of those schools don't stay in Hartford. And so a lot of the conversation about our community college was driven by the fact that for the Hartford community, for our residents, community college is often their only option or only perceived option for post-secondary education. And for us, it's also the educational institution that keeps more of our residents, or say whose graduates more often stay in the city of Hartford. But it's really important to highlight that even at our community college, the completion rate is stunningly and tragically low. We have so many Hartford residents who begin coursework at Capital Community College and never complete it. And so I think one of the things that we really can do and are trying to do is change the expectations and change culture around credentials other than a degree. Because for our residents who've got childcare challenges, who may have housing challenges, who may have difficulty balancing job and education, being able to come away from a semester with something that lasts and something that matters, rather than just making a little bit of progress towards a goal that ultimately they might have to take a detour from, is really, really important. And a part of that is working with our community college and other educational institutions to do that. A part of it is working with industry to make sure that those credentials are really designed for the jobs that are available. And a part of it is, I think, changing the culture sometimes inside corporate HR departments, so that they're really looking at skills rather than at degrees. I think it's important to say, anytime we're talking about this, that none of this should be seen as in tension with or inconsistent with setting really high expectations for ourselves as a community and wanting to make sure that any kid going through our Hartford Public Schools who wants to go to a four-year college has the ability to do that. But we also know the reality that far too few of our residents are getting there right now. And we need to make sure that we're doing everything we can to help make sure that there are multiple pathways to the life that our residents want to build.
Yeah, well, let me pick up on a point that you made that came up in all of the conversations we had in the three cities that we focused on, and that's the importance of employers.
Yeah.
And the key role that employers play in terms of signaling to education and training providers what competencies and skills that they're looking for, and then the ability to create active partnerships with the education and training providers that are in cities. And there's some very good examples in Hartford and in Chicago and in Phoenix. But from the perch of being a mayor, how do you work with the employers in your city so that they are communicating with the education and training providers that you have in Hartford, and also providing opportunities for the residents of Hartford, and doing so in kind of good jobs?
Yeah, I think the employers are absolutely key here. And the reality is that a lot of employers, a lot of industries used to do more on the job training. They used to hire and then prepare employees on the job more than happens right now. And so making sure that there are those strong partnerships is critical. One of the roles that I can play and that cities can play is simply as a convener to get everybody around the table and make sure that those conversations are happening. The other is to try to set that expectation as a city. All of our companies want to be good corporate citizens. They want to be good community members, and making sure that this is a part of the discussion is another way we can do that. And say, look, for no matter what philanthropic work you're doing, no matter what community building work you're doing, thinking about ways to be really deliberate about partnering with educational institutions to create pathways to employment at your company is a critical part of that community corporate responsibility. And as much as possible, making sure that there are job guarantees on the end is the ideal, but that's not always possible. You know, we do have some great apprenticeship programs where that's exactly what happens, where an student at Capital Community College is part of an apprenticeship program, and when they graduate, or even while they're there, they're also working at the Hartford, working at Travelers, getting that experience, guaranteed a job on the other end if they hold up their end. That's the most important and powerful partnership. But again, sometimes that may not be possible. And all that's possible, but still critically important, is being very clear about what the industry needs are, so that folks aren't, building themselves a bridge to nowhere. One of the things that I've heard countless times, and I'm sure you heard it in every city you went to, is how much fatigue and frustration there is in so many communities with the number of certificates that folks get, the number of training programs that people go through, only to find that there's no opportunity on the other end. And there's nothing more demoralizing than that for that individual, or for a community collectively, when the sense is that it doesn't matter how many programs you go through or you go to, they're not leading to jobs. So making sure there's that concrete outcome at the end is critical.
Yeah, I mean, just, the report mentions that there's over 700,000 credentials that are available in the United States today. And so many of those, again, are not connected to a specific job. And it just underscores the point that you're making. And it also, highlights how complex this landscape is when people have so many different choices and don't have great information about what that opportunity or that training opportunity may lead to in terms of a concrete job. Thank you and the other members of the City of Hartford for all of the help and support that they have given to our project as we have tried to recommend policies that cities can pursue in terms of creating more opportunities for lifelong learning. So thanks to you, and again, thanks to the members of the Hartford community who've been part of this project and are watching this webinar today. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Al.
Thank you, Al. Thank you for recognizing the important role that community colleges play in lifelong learning, and for highlighting our work in Chicago in the Aspen Future of Work report. As the report points out, lifelong learning is critical to maintaining professional relevance in a marketplace experiencing rapid technological change. This is made even more important today as millions of people have become unemployed and underemployed due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Education beyond high school is more critical than ever before. During the recession in 2008, our economy lost 5.6 million jobs for people with a high school diploma or less, and never really gained those jobs back. On the other hand, if you had an associate's degree, 3.1 million jobs were gained. And if you had a bachelor's degree, 8.4 million jobs were gained during that recovery. This pandemic will accelerate the need for post-secondary education and lifelong learning. Among undergraduates, community colleges students have been hard hit by this pandemic. Coupled with issues of systemic racism, that have long impacted them and their communities. At City Colleges, 75% of our students are Black or Latinx. Before the pandemic, more than 60% of our students who responded to the Real College survey reported that they were food or housing insecure or both. Many of our students are caring for family at the same time they pursue their education. Many rely on work in the same sectors like retail and hospitality, hardest hit by closures since the pandemic. This fall, community colleges nationwide saw substantially greater enrollment decline than four-year universities, as students made the choice to forego college due to financial and health reasons. This is alarming. As we all know, there is no more critical time for our students to continue learning than now, as their livelihoods change and our economy increasingly requires skills beyond a high school education. This past March, in 1 week's time, City Colleges transitioned 80% of our credit courses to remote delivery. Shortly thereafter, we put all of our student services online as well, as advisors, tutors, our wellness centers, and more are supporting students remotely today as we speak, and since those days in March. This was a big change for our students, faculty, and staff, especially for those students that needed technology to work from home. This year, we have distributed more than 9,000 tech devices, including loaner laptops and loaner Wi-Fi to our students and staff. We also raised more than $800,000 in private emergency funds for students and $2.8 million in private tuition assistance funds. Recognizing that once students leave us, it can be hard to get them back, we also launched a debt forgiveness program called Fresh Start, and so far have welcomed back 800 students who had been locked out of college because they held debt with us. We are now forgiving the entirety of those debts that students have upon their completion of their degrees. We are doing all we can to support our students' valiant efforts to continue their education. It has never been easy for many of the students we serve, and COVID has only made it harder, just at a time when continued education is most needed. Work we have already underway to facilitate lifelong learning prior to the pandemic is even more relevant today. Let me just point some of those out. We had been working in the process of expanding our non-credit continuing education programs, especially in tech fields. As non-credit programs, we're able to launch those more quickly. For instance, this spring, we began offering free online Cisco classes in a range of areas from cybersecurity to programming. In a matter of weeks, while we were in the midst of the pandemic, we had 1,800 students sign up. We had also developed a relationship with our county's workforce development board. During the pandemic, for example, we have partnered with the board on an effort to train hundreds of contract tracers to serve the Chicago area and stem the spread of coronavirus. We'd already been working with industry and employer partners to build a more connected learning ecosystem, and we continue to do so despite the pandemic. Our apprenticeship programs with companies like Aon and Accenture are only increasing in value. Apprenticeships provide our students the chance to earn family-sustaining wages while they build professional careers. We just received support from Bank of America to expand our work-based learning efforts in the tech field. We also partner with employers in a coordinated fashion to support incumbent worker advancement, and have just had the first graduation of our medical assistant pathway program that trains hospital and healthcare staff to take on patient-serving roles. These are just some examples of how Chicago's community college system is working to create more accessible programs for workers at all stages of their lives. Lifelong learning is critical. Community colleges play a key role. We must make it easier through better information, more connected resources, more affordable and flexible options to make lifelong learning a reality. Once again, thank you for your focus on community college students. Thank you for your focus on lifelong learning. And certainly, thank you for your support of community colleges across the United States of America.
Thank you so much, Chancellor Salgado. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm Becky Schmidt, and I am the Chief People Officer here at Cognizant. And I'm also a member of the Cognizant US Foundation, which I'll talk about in just a second. But just in case you're not familiar with Cognizant, we are a global company. We're in over 50 countries. We have roughly 300,000 professionals working at thousands of different client sites around the world. But as I say today, we have 300,000 office locations since we're all working in our home office. But we kind of span the IT industry, and we also provide a lot of custom services to multiple clients. So I'm really excited to be here today. Just 1 minute about my background. I have been practicing an HR practitioner for over 25 years now. And I've spent a lot of time on skilling and thinking about having a future-proof workforce. I spent over 20 years at Accenture, and then 4 years at Walmart in some of the Walmart brands, and I joined Cognizant early this year. So I'm going to give you my perspective, and some of it's about what we're doing today, and some of it's a little bit about kind of my own experience and how it's influenced my thought process on this. But as I said before, I'm also a member of the Cognizant US Foundation, and we're really pleased to have funded this work. With roughly 50,000 employees in communities across the US, we know the important role that cities play in supporting a strong workforce. Hearing directly today from the mayors and others on the ground is enlightening, it's inspiring. It feels amazing to be here in this blended organizational discussion between communities we live in as well as places that we work. That's really the secret of success. And it's us working collectively to solve for the future. I think we know that there's not like one size fits all or one silver bullet, but it's really about looking at different points in time, meeting people where they are, and then understanding where companies need to go and finding that best path forward. I'm here today to talk more about the role that employers can play in helping develop these lifelong learning systems and share a couple of key takeaways from the report that resonate with us. So one, I think it's really important that employers and whether it's a private or public sector, we're having an open dialogue about influencing the training and curriculum for the types of people and skills we need. We know that the market is moving very fast and the economy is changing. And of course, this year it's a whole new game. But historically, our training and skilling programs or our educational systems have not moved quite as quickly. And while we can't boil the ocean and fix everything all at once, we can work together on some small tweaks that can have seismic movement in terms of how people show up ready for work or be able to apply their skills to the jobs that are available. And it's really about looking at skill level location. So where are the people living? Where are the jobs needed? What kind of skills are required there? What type of basic education is available? What types of training programs? How can we partner together to co-create something that's amazing, whether that's to overall lift the, just the sort of employability of people overall, or it actually funnels directly into specific jobs an employer has. I think those are two really important things we need to be working on together. Next, as an employer and particularly as an HR professional, I like to think that we've got some bird's eye view into what skills are going to be needed for the future and what's in demand. Whether I'm looking 6 months out, 12 months, or 2 years out, we've got a plan based on how we see our business moving, based on our partners, and for Cognizant specifically, as we our professional services providers, we work with clients in all industries. And it's gleaning what we're hearing from the clients about the skills they need and synthesizing that with the services that we provide, that I think, Cognizant is actually really well placed to work with our communities and talk about skills of the future, because we've got this really unique intersection between multiple industries that we actually service, as well as where we're taking our business. And I think it's having this open dialogue between whether it's a training organization, it's a formal education system, or it's more of a one-time partnership to skill up people, as to what that looks like. And so it's really about employers, communities, educational organizations having this conversation about one size doesn't fit all. So how do we give people some building blocks, and how do we make them most ready for something now and a path to learn for something later? So you can see I'm super excited about this. And as I continue to think about what else resonates with me, we've got this opportunity to continue to invest in our people. So funding this lifelong learning. And sometimes, it's about learning something that gives you balance, like yoga. Other times it's about, pivoting your technical skill from one domain to another, and how to be ready for that. But we also have to give our people time to do that and help them learn in ways that are digestible, because not everyone can sort of stop working and go into a full-time training program. We're all in this really delicate balance. And so it's working together on sort of a digestible way of learning that will help people move forward. And I think in general, it's, getting ahead of reskilling and upskilling is never going to end. I think I've been talking about this my whole career. And sometimes it's been more finite, what you need to upskill or reskill people on. Other times, like now, it's a little bit more amorphous, right? It's changing. What we thought we needed maybe at the beginning of 2020 has been disrupted by a global pandemic. And even the clients that we work with, they've accelerated their own transition to a digital environment. So the demand for the skills that Cognizant provides has grown exponentially. And so it's not just about like, oh, well, now you're just busier. No, we're busier and it's different. And we need to get people ready and we need to get people excited. And then the people that are here need to have the time to learn the new things so they can continue to help us grow. And that's a really delicate balance. I often feel like I'm juggling some glass balls, but it's an exciting challenge. And I know that I'm not alone. And so I feel really supported by the dialogue that's going on here today with all the panelists. And I look forward to continue to team to build for the future. So with that, I think I'll tie it up here and I'll turn it over to Rick.
Well, thanks so much, Becky. It's great to be with everybody. I'm Rick Wartzman from the Drucker Institute. We have a terrific panel today to talk about lifelong learning from a city perspective, but also really lifelong learning in action. Duncan, Matt, and Rachel and myself are involved not just in thinking about how to give people in different communities access to new skills and knowledge, but we're practitioners, all of us testing out these ideas in the real world. And so I'm excited to engage in a conversation that really gets behind the theoretical to the hands-on, to the pragmatic, to the messiness of the actual. Before we dive in, I want to make one quick point, though, if I may. Having read about the work of the other panelists, I think I'm confident in speaking for all of us when I say that it's essential to kick off any dialogue like this with the declaration that learning is not a magic bullet. Although training and education are our focus today, what we're going to be talking about are really just pieces of a much larger set of resources that are required for any community to flourish. People also need access to high quality jobs that pay a living wage and provide strong benefits. They need access to reliable transportation and high quality, affordable childcare. They need safe neighborhoods where they have options to buy healthy food and green spaces for their kids to play. And all of these things need to be integrated holistically and harmoniously for a city to truly thrive. And all sectors, public, private, and nonprofit, have to play a part in ensuring that these foundations are in place for everyone. So with that caveat of sorts laid out, let's talk about the need for lifelong learning, which of course in this fast changing economy really is critical, really is an important piece of the puzzle. So I'd like to begin by asking each of you to describe briefly how your organization is fostering lifelong learning, but also how it fits into a bigger ecosystem of skills and training, skills training and education in your city. So Duncan, let's start with you and what role Capital Community College plays alongside other stakeholders that have helped to fill in gaps in workforce development services in your city.
Yeah. Thanks for that, Rick, and thank you for your statement about kind of the how important this work is, and all of us being in the vineyard, at this critical point in time. And so as I think about lifelong learning, it was interesting. A company called Infosys just set up headquarters in Hartford, and at one of the initial panels that I attended in welcoming them to the city, they talked about this concept of when they're hiring, they're looking for attributes that suggest learnability in a candidate. And what they meant by that was that as their company evolves over time, that what they're actually measuring for is the ability of the successful candidate to adapt to perhaps a new role at work, et cetera. And so when we began to have conversations about us structuring our curriculum around that, we moved and pivoted to managing information on the web. We talked about working in teams, cultural competency, and working with others from around the world, et cetera. And so, Capital, one of the things that we've really focused on is this idea of, and recognition that our students need to have a ability to learn in different work environments over time. Our average age is actually 28. And so, once again, as we're working with adults and supporting them in their ability to be competitive and transition amongst different careers. And so that's, front and center for us in terms of overtime and lifelong learning, essential.
Yep. No, it's great. I know that in South Bend, Indiana, where the Drucker Institute, my team and I have a lifelong learning system called Bendable, providing access to training and learning opportunities for folks all across the city, both in person, although less of that in COVID times, and digitally. We talk a lot about cultivating in people the habit of continuous learning, and it sounds like that's very much what you're driving at with this idea. Matt, what about in Chicago? What's P33's role? How does that fit into the bigger picture of lifelong learning across the city?
Yeah, first of all, thank you, Rick, and good to meet everybody. I hope that P33 is going to be able to fill a hole that exists in Chicago, and I think in a number of cities around the region, of being able to, of effectively capturing the demand and channeling the hiring demand from companies in the region. Our focus is particularly on technology roles, but I think the same principle applies. Channeling that demand and bringing it into the learning ecosystem, whether that's lifelong learning and postgraduate students, certificate students, or even in the traditional undergrads in K-12. Our role as a private sector nonprofit, chartered to make Chicago, bring Chicago back to a leadership role in the technology economy and to drive inclusive economic growth, is squarely focused on that. And it's, it was actually created out of a conversation, an organic conversation by Chicago business leaders, technology leaders, and those sort of like, city leaders, as it were, who said, we're doing it wrong right now. As a city, we're leaving too much potential on the table. We're leaving too many people out of the benefits of the digital economy. And we need to approach at significant scale that can be sustainable and that harnesses all the assets that we have: great academic institutions, great workforce programs, and great companies that are just disconnected. And so how can this new entity, P33, play a role in bringing that together and making some magic out of the combination of those ingredients?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it sounds like you're in a place where that may not be under-resourced, but maybe under-organized in some sense.
Yeah, and I think we're not alone in that. I think, yes, we're very well resourced. We have great institutions in Chicago, and yeah, they could be better organized, and there could be better information flows from different parts of the ecosystem to, from one to the other. And there could be, I think there's some systems elements, that need to be put in place to maximize the potential.
That's great. And Rachel, how about you? What's happening in Phoenix? Tell us about your organization and your role in this bigger ecosystem.
Absolutely. Thanks so much. So yeah, in Phoenix and in Arizona in general, we've started with this sort of notion that we only as a state and as a cities, inclusive of that state, are going to be successful if we meet big attainment goals. And in our state, what our goal really focuses on is the adult learner. And the first thing we have to do is really break down, like, who is the adult learner? What do they need? And if we are to make them successful, what would that mean for our state? And so looking at a city like Phoenix, which is certainly our largest metropolis area, it means that we need to have learners who understand why going back to school makes sense, but also that they have a job at the end that materially changes their life. Because the truth is, if you're making $10 an hour, and you can go to school for 2 years and maybe make $3 more per hour, it probably doesn't make sense for you. And that's just a reality we have to face. So communicating that there are high wage, in-demand jobs that have a quick turnaround on learning, which I think, Matt was sort of talking about, this digital space is a space where you can actually get relatively quickly trained up into a work environment where you're making more, your life is different, you have benefits potentially for the first time, to your point that it is actually an ecosystem. It can't just be an hourly wage, but your family is materially changed if you suddenly have benefits. And so what we're trying to see in all of our cities, but certainly again, Phoenix as a model, is that we are connecting all of those dots. We're breaking down the silos, which are intentional. So to Matt's point, or maybe to your point, Rick, these were developed, but they were actually developed intentionally. Workforce is separate from education. Maybe that doesn't make sense anymore, but they are. And so how do we build that bridge so that it's not a confusing system? And what I like to think about all the time is that, I don't think no adult walks into a workforce system office and says, I really want to go to a public institution because I know where my tax dollars are going. They're just saying, I need a job. I need my life to be better. And I actually don't care what gets me there, but just tell me how to get there. And so we need to think about how we build all those public systems so that no one has to maneuver that. And that's the work we're trying to do, is to build that system so it's seamless for all of our learners.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. Everyone, I think, has really touched on this idea of trying to create a real ecosystem with seamless collaboration, coordination, and Duncan, you began by talking about the community colleges, kind of integration with employers, and Rachel and Matt, your organizations kind of maybe sit sort of in a hub position and trying to bring all these different stakeholders together. What for each of you? Maybe we just do a quick round robin. What's the toughest part of that? What are the barriers to that kind of cooperation, or maybe the biggest barrier you face in trying to make that system seamless? Duncan, let's start with you.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I could piggyback on some of the comments, from Matt and Rachel about, kind of that system and the power of the collective is something that I like to refer to, and it's interesting. I think that the sharing of information and data. My student might be your client at that community-based organization, right? And my investment of limited resources into them would be strengthened if we could share data about the investment that you've made, right? And so my 33% plus your 33% at the CBO plus the other 33% from whatever the organization gets them to 100. On our own, none of them on our own would likely get that student client person we care about to the finish line. And so I think as we build out these systems in a very different way, our ability to share the investments that have been made into client, student, fill in the blank, across organizations is a barrier that we're working on right now. And so we're working with Hartford Public Schools to talk about sharing data. And you've spent 12 years investing in this young person. How can we have a better handoff that I'm able to leverage that information that to get that student that we both care about to to the finish line or into the world of work. And so hopefully as we're building these systems that we're able to integrate and fold into whatever we're creating, the ability to share data across organizations, and whether that's FERPA or releases that are required, or it's an understanding that that client student has going into the relationship, that we're going to work together, sharing the data and information we have about you to hopefully get you to whatever your goal is. Right.
So I'm inferring the challenge in that is, I mean, one, beyond the data, systems can be creaky, and the actual physical technological IT piece of that, it's just maybe changing a mindset to get different stakeholders to not just think about their siloed piece of the system, but actually see themselves as part of an integrated system. That just got to be, I know there are challenges with that because we're facing them in South Bend.
Yeah, it's all of our resources are limited, right? And I think once we have that breakthrough epiphany moment where we say, there's an economic sensibility to us not starting from scratch every time we work with this individual that we care about, and I should be able to leverage, the work and the investments that have been made in that individual prior to them coming to capital. And if we start to do that in a very different way, I have a sense that the system and the individual, once again, will be better off for that. So we that's on our end, right? And that's policy, and hopefully we have a little bit more say so in the policies that impede our ability to get these folks to the finish line and into the world of work, to be able to provide for themselves and their families.
Yeah. Rachel, how about for you? What's the toughest thing about trying to coordinate and collaborate?
Yeah, I think I said it already, but I'll say it again. The toughest thing about coordination is that these systems were not designed to coordinate. And so literally in their design, in their creation, in their funding stream, to the point of data, they were not designed this way. And so you're undoing intentional design. And so that's hard work. And it's hard work to figure out what steps go first. Is it a policy step first, or is it a collaboration step first? Is it a proof point that you need, or is it a complete system overhaul? And so I think that I often chuckle that everyone loves the idea of local control until they actually try to get something done, or everyone likes the idea of a big bureaucracy until they want to move fast. And so we build the systems that we think we want, and then we have to test them, and then we find out that they don't work, or that we want to tweak them. But that means undoing intentional design. So I don't want to oversimplify a really complicated concept, but I do think we have to remind ourselves, like, it was designed not to work together, and therefore we shouldn't be surprised that it doesn't work together.
Yep. Matt, how about for you?
Yeah, I mean, I co-sign on everything that Duncan and Rachel said. All of that is true. So I don't need to add words there, but I'll add a kind of a different angle, I guess, where it's like, because all of that is a problem, we run into this challenge then when we occasionally have a good idea, and so people get around a table and say, hey, I think we have a new approach on this, is being able to move quickly enough to get the density you need and the sort of speed to scale that ensures that people stay on, like, keep with it 3 and 5 and 7 and 10 years later, and you're growing that good concept, rather than, you got some good progress and some partners got involved, but you didn't move fast enough, and then someone else 3 years later had a different idea that is going to be the thing, and they got some funders and some partners involved, and we churn through so many of those because we can't get big quickly enough in these big, these regional change initiatives, and get the sort of, like, dominant scale, if you will, that you see in the economy with, I don't like the sort of the analog of platform companies, but because they move so quickly to get to a point where it's like, all right, that's the thing now, and everyone's going to use that, or is going to orient around that platform, we never get there. So there's all these sort of zombie initiatives walking around with some partners and some success and some funding, and they never change the game for a region.
Yeah, Matt, I'm going to pick up on that actually, and sort of take us into the next sort of thing I wanted to ask about. And I'm actually skipping ahead a few questions, but you teed it up perfectly. So I'll tell you one of the things that we found in our lifelong learning system, Bendable. We've been up just a short time. We launched in June in South Bend, Indiana, our first community. We're looking to expand to others. our face to the community is the public library. We've had 10,000 local visitors come to the digital platform, which is great. We've had a couple thousand go off to our content partners like Penn Foster and edX and CellEd and Study.com, and local partners like Ivy Tech and IUSB and so on, and access, some content. But we also know, we've only had a few dozen maybe actually starting to really work through courses and really do the things that you need to do to really do the kind of deep learning that may give you the new skills to acquire that better job and change your life. Learning is hard, right? And so, we've had to work with our funders and with others in the community to try and start to level set expectations about scale and success and what that means. And I'll get off my hobby horse in a second here, but it drives me crazy to see, when some, I will leave nameless, big tech companies say, we're going to digitally reskill 25 million people by, within 18 months or whatever. And I just go, no, you're not. That's a lie. It's not true. Learning is hard. Adult learning is really hard for people with busy lives and kids and maybe barriers to just living their lives every day and getting through. And so I'm wondering how do you define scale? How do you define success for your program? So let me come back to you with that and how you think about that, and then we'll go around, because this is a question that drives us kind of batty.
Yeah, it's a great question because I agree with what you just said. It's like, let's not be ridiculous. Like, this stuff is hard, and it takes a while. It takes a lot of combination of resources. It takes serving someone in the context of a complicated life. At the same time, I think everyone in this who's been doing this work is frustrated by the limited scale that we've achieved, such that, like, we have great programs that impact lives, and that's real, and let's honor that. And that's whether it's tens, hundreds, or in some cases thousands a year. That's awesome. But it doesn't change the economic reality of neighborhoods and cities, and it doesn't change, like, the racial inequities in Chicago.
Yeah.
So how do we, what's the middle point where it's like, what's the maximum ambition we can have? And so at P33, how we thought about this is, when we're focused on technology, we say, we want to have a technology workforce that reflects the city of Chicago in its racial and ethnic and gender dynamics and demographics. We're nowhere near it. And we're actually working through the numbers live right now to figure out, what do we need to be doing 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, so that in 2035 and 2040 that we're actually at that equity. And let's be clear about that, because otherwise we get kind of lazy, and governors and mayors and all of us like to announce things that we're doing that are, we got 100 people through this, or maybe 1,000 people, but is it changing the economic trajectory of neighborhoods and communities or in cities or not? And we need to get tighter on the numbers, but that's how we would think about the ballpark that we're in.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Duncan, how about for you? How do you all think about numbers?
Yeah, I think that we're ever mindful to not lose the identity of the individual in the number also, right? Mm-hmm. And one of the things that we know about Hartford and the impact of poverty, and so I have some of the zip codes that are some of the poorest zip codes in the nation, with over 100 students that reside in it. And I'm very aware that it's not mission drift for me to take on issues outside of academic rigor and academic and cognitive preparation. And so all my students, we've eliminated transportation as a barrier, so in terms of public, still need to work on the quality and the timing of the buses and things, but we, that you can get to school. This morning I was bringing in, food in our food pantry. I'm on the board of Food Share, which is one of the largest, food security providers in the state. And so I've launched 2 pantries at community colleges. And so, yeah, you can't do differential equations if you haven't eaten in a few days, but once again, that's not mission drift for me to be aware of what's going on with my students and to ameliorate those barriers to individuals getting to jobs. And so some of the equity challenges that you alluded to, I mean, you're not going to get to that digital job at fill in the blank if there are some of those poverty related issues impacting where you sleep at night, if you're able to sleep there at night. So we've taken on housing also, right? And so I say all that to say that we don't lose, kind of Maslow and the hierarchy in order to get people to these jobs. And once again, we need to lean in and attack poverty with equal fervor and vigor as we do some of the other, cognitive barriers to students completing the degrees that we have. And so we've reorganized in that way. My faculty are, leaning into that. And now I don't need you to be a social worker. I do need you to have expertise in your discipline. However, I do need you to know to refer a student to our equity center if a student, presents in a certain way or may have stopped coming to class. And some of the things, it's not mission drift for us to pay a month's rent. It's probably cheaper than finding a new student. And so there's an economic kind of piece to some of the things, and which may, people may raise their eyebrows at that. But at the same time, I've got an AB student who, for whatever reason, worked at a hotel in Hartford and lost their job. But if I could tie them through to get them to complete that short-term certificate, that's money well invested. And it's not mission drift.
Yep.
And it's not something that needs to occur outside of our building. And so it's a pivot, it's re-engineering of what we do. But I think, once again, capital being in Hartford, being aware that 1,000 of my students reside and live and sleep in Hartford, over 1/3, that's those issues that confront them and plague them. We need to take them on and lean into them. And it's not mission or mission drift to do that work.
No, and that's real success when you can change the trajectory of lives that way. But it ain't an algorithm that's gonna, that's gonna explode the numbers. But in a touch lives, or somebody clicked on something, and that's counts as success. So I very much appreciate what you're saying. Again, it really underscores how hard this is, how hard learning is, because there's so much underneath that has to happen. I'll just point out quickly too that, by the way, if some of us could not do differential equations no matter how well we eat.
Yeah, that's good.
Rachel, how about you? How do you all define success? How do you look at at scale?
Yeah. So, I run a statewide big attainment goal. So we're trying to get 60% of adults in Arizona to a post-secondary credential degree, which is a huge number. Roughly, it's about 1 million more learners by 2030. When I hear that number, I want to throw up inside my mouth. And I think most people get really sweaty and anxious. So the first thing we had to do was try to break that number into chunks that we felt like we could actually measure and see success towards. Because if you're just measuring toward 1 million, it takes a long time to see growth. So one thing I would say toward what we do with our cities and counties and towns is we ask them to set the local goal, right? What does it mean for Phoenix to do their part to get to the 60% goal, which is really different than what it means for Safford, Arizona, or for even La Paz County, which the entire county is, 10,000 people. So we have to, I think, build in the systems and the structures that allow us to see success at a local level. And then sort of Duncan's point, we have to layer on the equity element, that it is not just throw spaghetti at the wall. It is who is the furthest from attainment. And what we look at it is we just say, look, here's the data. It is, you can't argue with it, we hope. And it also points out that there are systemic inequities. And we're not here to blame, but we are here to say we cannot sustain any sort of goal if we do not address these. And so starting with those who need to have more access to equity and attainment first, and build those pathways. And again, I would say that's again a way to allow us to see growth and to see that we are successful, even if it is addressing all these other barriers to access first. It allows us to see that we are making those steps. And again, localizing that goal. Maryvale, which is part of Phoenix, but West Phoenix is very, very, very different than South Phoenix in a lot of demographic numbers. It's also really different than North Phoenix. And so again, this allows for the data to speak to the communities that we're trying to work with, and to the people so they see themselves in it. And then I would lastly say, I think that we have to remember, and we do this work, talking to people all the time and reminding people that numbers are really great. And I know that that's what we're trying to get to, is talking about scale. But I also think if we can remind people that, you can make a lot of difference for one person and for one family, and that the goal and the numbers shouldn't be the driver, but the vision and the outcome of that, right? And I think it really is compelling when we remind people what it means to, like help a person find a job where they have a weekend off. I remember I was in the business of hiring at one point in my life, and I got to hire somebody who was in her 50s and she started crying because I told her she didn't have to work on Saturday and Sundays. It was the first time in her life, in her 50s, that she had the weekends off. So I just think that we also can count by that there's a way to count one person at a time that reminds people that that's the vision and the mission, and then that is worth doing every single time. So those are all of our attempts to try to bring these really big numbers into something really personal.
That's great. And just to stick on the number for one second, how did you arrive at 60%? How did you come to that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So our state arrived at 60% for a few reasons. One, it's ambitious. So we wanted a goal that would be hard, but not so hard that we couldn't do it. We looked at the data, and we're starting when they started this analysis in 2015 at around 42%. So it'd be a jump. But also we have some pretty amazing institutions in our state who said, while 55 might sound hard, we believe that our role is to push us further. So our institutions actually came together at a large sort of group and said, we want 60 because we see that our job is to make that happen. And so actually 60%, it also is a great number because we were able to run some backward math and see that if we are able to pull this off, it's about, a 3 times GDP gain for our state, which is a nice number for our state to sort of get excited about, of a 3x.
Yep, that's great. That's great. So everyone, it's interesting, in talking about scale, really focused on the importance of reaching communities that have traditionally, not had access to training and learning opportunities, and really making that a focus. And we do the same in South Bend. We try and set up a system where, again, through the public library, people can access these learning opportunities, and we try and make it as frictionless as possible. So you need a library card to have full access to the system, which is great. But we don't ask for a lot of demographic data or data. We do track zip code data, very much though for the purpose. And unfortunately, it's a pretty good proxy, I think, like in most cities, for income and race. And so we do try and make sure that we're reaching the entire community. I'm curious if you can, you've all touched on this, but tactically, how do you try and ensure equity in your approach? What are you actually doing in the nitty-gritty to make sure that that again, training and learning opportunities are more equitably distributed? Matt, let's start with you.
Yeah, it's a great and hard question. A few things jump to mind. So I'm interested to learn more about Bendable. I hadn't heard about it before, so I didn't want to know more about that. It sounds similar to something that we launched in response to COVID here in Chicago called Tech Ready Illinois. And there's a partnership between P33 and an organization called the Discovery Partners Institute, which is a part of the University of Illinois system. And we saw millions of people getting laid off in Illinois or furloughed, and they're staying at home because there's lockdown. So, well, how can we help folks come out of this downturn better positioned in the labor market? And as we launched Tech Ready Illinois, it's a platform to understand different technology career paths and then go get connected. Like, hey, there's a course starting in cloud systems administration or web development or whatever. And we made sure when we built that there were a whole spectrum of options. So if someone got laid off from they already have a bachelor's and they had a good job in tech maybe, and they want to go to the University of Chicago and get an advanced certificate in AI and ML, awesome. Let's connect them to that. That's a good thing, right? At the same time, we wanted to ensure that both high quality community college options and some of our best workforce development programs that serve folks without as strong of learning backgrounds or without as strong of work histories were available. So we made sure there was a full suite there. And that's kind of the approach in everything else we're doing. We're working with companies right now to imagine new talent sourcing solutions. We have a coalition of employers who want to figure this out. The question is, all right, we know they have certain very high skilled interests and we want to serve those, keeps everyone engaged. but we need to bring them also into helping create new non-traditional pathways into tech jobs. And they're open to it, as long as we can keep it all as a talent solution. If they see, oh, there's talent solutions here, and there's like, we're doing this good stuff over here for like, you know, the low income people, then we're going to lose. If they can see it all as a comprehensive strategic talent set of solutions, then we can win as a region.
That's really interesting. I mean, it's important, you know, I think employers, right, need to see that, but I think so do individuals. So, you know, one of our ideas on Bendable is we want learning to unite the whole community. We want everybody to feel, because we all have to keep learning, right? All of our skills and knowledge are becoming obsolete ever faster. And so I think there's in the past been too much of, right, there's, you know, and we love and we work with the local workforce development board, but it's like, that's a set of learning or training for those poor people over there. And there's kind of a stigma to it. We've now taken their resources, and they might be, or a CEL-Ed, which has basic literacy and numeracy and job readiness skills, and we will juxtapose it literally on our site with a, you know, AI analytics class from edX, you know, from MIT. And at first people said, God, it's so jarring. You know, you have these two things next to each other that normally don't fit together. And we're like, no, we're all in this together. We all have to keep learning. And I think there's something powerful in democratizing that. And that's a great way to get at some of the equity issues.
We hope. That's the bet.
Yeah, that is the bet. Rachel, how about you? How are you leaning into equity again from a real tactical, you know, standpoint? How do you reach folks who really haven't been reached in the past?
Yeah. So I'll speak about one project we've been working on with the city of Phoenix. So we had this idea that there is a benefit that exists, tuition education reimbursement policies in most of our public entities like cities, counties, states, right? But we know from sort of just general data across the nation, very little uptake. And then we sort of this theory that the people that do are already people who hold a bachelor's degree and they want to move into like sort of upper management, right? Get their master's paid for. So we said, what if we flip that script on its head? What if we worked at the city of Phoenix and some other cities and we said, who doesn't yet have attainment? Who works at a city, secondary degree or credential? So, you know, it's our maintenance crews. It's a lot of folks who work in sort of admin assistants kind of roles. It's people who are navigators, often helping people with benefits, right? It's a lot of roles in sort of labor type elements of the cities. And so we said, well, okay, like if we know those are the people, demographically, who are those people? And we had to ask the cities, like, do you know your demographics? That was an interesting question. Sometimes they did, sometimes they didn't. So then we did some discovery. Then we actually did some focus groups to bring those groups together to say, what do you know about these benefits? And you know, it was fascinating to find out so many of these frontline sort of employees who would be the most served by these educational benefits had no idea. We found out they don't even have email addresses often because they're working in technical sort of labor element jobs. And so they're not at a computer every day. They don't even have access to technology. So when the managers are telling us, oh, it's in our newsletters all the time, we're pointing out, actually, these are the people who don't even see that. And so it was a really great way to say, we want to support you. We want to help you write a best-in-class policy. We want to help you to refine and define better these educational pathways with an equity lens first. You need to help us, you know, bring these folks together, and we need to say, these are the people. In the city of Phoenix, the majority of these people are Latino and Black, African-American residents that are working in the city that do not have an attainment degree certificate yet. And they are the ones who most likely can benefit from this, but we have to redefine how we do outreach, how we communicate the benefit, how we build those pathways so that they can start in a sort of certificate level and move up if they want to, move through their education. But it was designed around the equity, but taking an existing program and asking, does equity even apply? And finding out that it didn't until we asked the question.
Yeah, being super intentional about it for sure. Yep. And Duncan, how about for you? You talked a lot about the support you're offering to certain, parts of the community, but what about just in terms of, marketing, access, getting the word out? How are you all approaching that?
Yeah, let me preface my remarks by saying that we need to be doing more and better, right, in this space. We had a study done by Anna Stansberry. She's a social economist out of Harvard. And what she found was that Capital ranked in the top 5% of community colleges nationally with our ability to move families to income quartiles based on, completion of, one of our degrees. Now, I'll say that we got to that metric. It wasn't a lot of intentionality in that, but yeah, if somebody from one of my zip codes goes and completes my nursing degree or cybersecurity, of course they're able to do more for themselves and their families. But I think we need to be more intentional about the level of sophistication with which we go about that work. I'd suggest that we are intentional about who we partner with. And so we just entered into an MOU with the Urban League. And so, we both are equity-minded organizations in terms of how we roll out our support for our clients/students. And so that's a program for justice-involved youth. And so obviously moving the needle for that group. There are the Puerto Rican Health Forum. And so in terms of the approach to the work, locking arms with other equity-minded organizations, and then that mission overlap, right? And so, and then I'll conclude with a piece tied to what Rachel was referring to in terms of the pathways. And I'll be one of the first to admit that while it's a good thing to have folks complete certain SNAP certificates, if we're not making sure that while, upon completion, we don't also talk to them about continuing their education and filling out a FAFSA, which provides them with a full Pell Award, which allows them to move from CNA or early childhood ed to, a teacher preparation program, or get into our nursing program, or, radiological technology. Shame on us if that by design we're not creating structures which ensure that happens. Otherwise, we're doing a disservice in some regard on setting individuals up to not see that full continuum. One of the things that I'll talk about and with groups is and as an approach for the colleges is this idea of first job, a better job, your career, right? Mm-hmm. And one of the things, we might help you get that first job at the hospital, working. But shame on us if after, taking bio or Excel or public speaking, we don't help you get to that better job with the benefits that Rachel mentioned, or weekends off, or that allow you to study more, or pursue your baccalaureate degree. And then ultimately, how we're organized should result in an individual having a sense of what all of us on this call have is a career, right? And so by design and by, intentionality and with how we're engineering our experience when students step, first job, a better job, our career. And all of our students are entitled to that. I think it's an equity issue. I agree with some of the folks that have talked about education being liberation in some regard. I know that that's a family value within my family. And I think about my grandfather, who was a sharecropper. And so here it is that I'm a college president based on, education and opportunity and kind of the continuum, et cetera. And so I think we kind of, walk that walk and talk that talk, but some of it has been not as intentional or as I would like to see it. And I think we're getting there, though, right? But we're committed.
I'd love to underscore just like the importance of that point. And this concept of pathways, it's like, I'm gonna get a chunk of learning, a job, then another chunk of learning, a job. It's been kind of canon in the work for, a decade or so. And it's always been elusive in practice. It sounds like you guys are making great gains up there, even though you're humble and acknowledge there's more to do. It sounds like we can all learn a lot from what's going on at Central, because it's been hard to deliver on that conversion of the second step of the journey. It's tough.
Yeah, we're getting there. Work in progress.
What I hear, Duncan, though, to get there again is, just to highlight a few of the things you've said is that full, support for your students, making sure that they can learn, they have the capacity in their lives to learn, because you've taken care of maybe some other things, or helping them take care of some other things that they really need just to live life. And then these key partnerships with employers, but beyond employers, right? Organizations like the Urban League that both provide access and opportunity, right, for your students. And so again, I think it's really, you've creating your own ecosystem, working with others. And again, it kind of comes back to the beginning of the conversation that way. Great. So we're going to shift to some questions now that are coming in from folks here. From Rick Melita from the SEIU in Hartford. And Rick asks, for years, unions have run paid training programs for workers that help them transition from apprenticeships into careers. What role do you see for labor in city-level lifelong learning systems? And also, do you consider private and public sector labor unions as potential partners in this work or impediments to economic and social progress? Anyone working with unions? Anyone want to take that?
Take a stab at that, even though Arizona is actually a pretty low union state with our right to work rules. But I would say, you know, maybe this isn't the exact parallel, but you know, I think about the user, right? The learner or the adult that we're talking about, they're who they hear the message about lifelong learning from is important. And so unions have a role if they have a membership and they are the one who workers trust and rely on and look to for guidance. They have a role to play in promoting that idea of lifelong learning and helping to say, I see potential in you, I believe in you, here's a program, here's a pathway. I would say that, you know, in a state like mine, where there's not as much influence from unions, but there's a lot of influence obviously from employers have a role that just because an employee comes in and they have a skill set that meets their need today, that they also have a role to ensure the employee meets their needs tomorrow and in the future, right? And so, and that employee, as we know from lots and lots of data and lots of studies, that employee is most likely to go back to school and obtain that learning when their employer says, I have a job for you, I see potential in you, and I want you to do this. So I actually think that could be just the best value add from a trusted source like a union leader to say our people matter and we're going to develop them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll give you one just quick thing we're doing in South Bend. We have on our platform what we call career collections. These are learning pathways. It's the one place we actually have digital badging in the system. We use Credly's Acclaim platform. We work in partnership with mostly local employers and business organizations to help us figure out what, you know, the in-demand skills are, say, to be a CNC operator or to be a pharmacy tech, or we have several industries that we cover in these, and they help us build out these pathways, looking at our catalog of learning options with our content providers, again, like study.com or Penn Foster or edX and so on. And we build out these pathways, and our local partners too, Goodwill, Ivy Tech, and so on. But we're also being conscious of reaching out to the Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, because we want them to build a pathway with us, and we're in those discussions now. We think it's really actually important to have labor representation as well if you're going to really have a concept of a whole ecosystem, and again, that learning is for everybody, and it's a way to unite a community and bring everybody together. I think we have time for one more. This is a question from Dr. Larry Johnson, president of Phoenix College. He asks, for adult workers, it's hard to know which skills or credentials lead to a good paying job. How can city lifelong learning systems create more transparency for potential students around which programs lead to good paying jobs? Anyone want to take that?
I'll offer a thought here. And this is such an important question, difficult one to solve. But I guess the provocative thought is that information isn't going to do it, and we need to be maybe more aggressive with advising. It's tough for any of us who are in this work to process all the reports from a Burning Glass or from BLS or whatever, and to, like, if someone asks, your cousin, your uncle, whatever, asks, like, hey, what should Sally go do? I don't know, it's tough. It's a lot of information, and just giving people lots of more charts and data and like 38.6% growth of this occupation over the next 10 years is just not helpful, I don't think. And we need to strengthen advising that's informed by data, but can be sort of channeled through an individual who can understand the complexity of one individual's life and goals and realities and economic situation, and give them a few options, not 36 options, but 3 options, right?
Yeah, and I want to build on that. I think advising is so critical, because I also think we have to remember it's a human being at the other side of it. And so if I always tell people, I taught high school for a while, and my 15-year-old girls all wanted to be cosmetologists, which is totally logical because hair and makeup is really fun when you're 15. And to tell a girl at 15 that that is a bad profession to go into because she won't earn very much is just foolish. It's not what she's hearing. And I would say that that's the same with a parent, a working mom who shows up, at Duncan school and says, I need to change my life. They have a limited set of constraint of options, I guess. Like they have some constraints in their life. And so if they come to the table saying, I see my cousin doing, a CNA role and their life is different than mine and it's better. Who are we to say that's the wrong pathway for you given X, Y, Z that we know about you? We need to acknowledge where that person's coming from. And I would say build off their strengths, build off their interests, build off their desires. And maybe along the way, there's a conversation about earning potential and pathways and career building. But to just squelch the thing that brought that person to the table in the first place or makes them excited is to deny what all of us are excited about with learning, and what makes that learning that is hard into learning that is hard and interesting. And I'm sure Duncan can add to this so much, but I just want to remember there's humans at the end of this.
Yeah, and let me continue the building on some of the pieces that we talked about. And as a person who this concept of guided pathways, so a number of years I drank the Kool-Aid early on with regard to belief in systems. And I started my career working as a counselor and advisor in community colleges. And I think we need to do a better job of front loading, that wise counsel up front, right? And based off of assessments of what the students, where their passions lie and where their strengths lie. And, when you talk about guided pathways and this continue, you talk about kind of the two, through and a from is the way that I'll break it up into these three kind of distinct domains. And by spending more time in getting them into the right pathway where they should have information about what I can expect to earn and the lifestyle and a 401k that gets me past 65, that helps inform and the grit and determination and oftentimes the motivation for me to stay in school and complete and make sacrifices along the way, within this guided pathways. And so I think, sometimes we're somewhat remiss by not having systems set up which allow individuals to get into the right pathway. Equally important to know what I don't like to do. I don't want to see blood. I don't want to work outside. I want to work by myself, so we can help kind of zero in and eliminate options. But we do need to spend a little bit more time front loading, providing individuals with guidance and wise counsel about what this particular pathway entails and what I can expect at the end of it, right? And so, we need to be a little bit more, I know EMSI, there's other groups and products that we could spend time providing students with the ability to make an informed decision, day one. Right. And also one of the things that we're very mindful of is designing our curriculum in a way in which it scaffolds so that if I do need to make a shift, that I'm not, for the lack of a more technical term, screwed, because all the credits that I've amassed to date don't apply to this degree that I ultimately want to. But I do think we need to spend a little bit more time and make an investment up front with the realities and sensibilities of the degrees and programs that folks are beginning or launching into.
Very well put.
Yeah, I would amen all that. And I think what I really, hear again, all of you saying, just because I don't think we can underscore it enough, is, that kind of honing at the beginning, getting somebody on the right path. System design really helps, the right system design. Even algorithms can help, right? It helps that burning glass data and helps someone make sense of it. But just to come back to Rachel's point, at the end of the day, it's about a human being helping another human being. And again, that's harder stuff to scale, if we're honest about it, right? That's, it just is. But learning's hard, and it takes that very kind of personal coaching, support, hug in a safe distance way now. But it takes a human being, interacting with another human being, and learning is social, and that's really what it comes down to in the end. So I want to thank everybody. What a great panel, Duncan and Rachel and Matt. Thank you so much. It was such a rich conversation. I got to 3 of my 10 questions. So Rachel, next time maybe at a 30% rate, we'll stretch. If we do this again, we'll try and get 6 questions in next time and see if we can do that. Okay.
Thanks, Rick, Duncan, Matt, and Rachel, for such a thoughtful panel discussion. First, let me close by offering my sincere thanks to the Cognizant US Foundation for their partnership and support for this event and throughout our 18-month engagement on this project. Since this is a report about cities, in Hartford, Chicago, and Phoenix in particular, we are indebted to the many leaders in these three cities who took time out of their busy schedules to join our discussions and review the findings of our report. In particular, Mayor Gallego and Mayor Bronin and senior staff in Mayor Lightfoot's office have been gracious with their time, and their feedback has greatly benefited our understanding of cities and the role that lifelong learning can play in those cities across the United States. Finally, I'd like to thank our panelists for their many contributions to the project in our report, and to everyone who took time today to watch today's webinar. We hope this is a beginning of a conversation on the topic of what cities can do to help adult workers adapt and thrive in a rapidly changing economy. Our report lays out a series of recommendations for cities to consider as next steps, and we encourage you to read the report and join the conversation. At the same time, we are mindful that cities are facing overlapping challenges, and none is more important than overcoming the public health crisis and the resulting economic crisis that the pandemic has brought to every city and town in our country. As our report lays out, the pandemic is not the first, nor will it be the last disruption to jobs and industries. Technology and globalization have been changing work for decades and will continue to do so even after the pandemic subsides. But the pandemic highlights and underscores the urgency of today's conversation, the need to make it easier for people to identify new jobs, understand what training is necessary to secure those jobs, and do so in a way that is affordable and accessible and promotes equity. Lifelong learning is only one component of what we need to provide to workers in today's economy. But nevertheless, it is an important component and one that is becoming more important as the nature of work continues to change. Cities have been centers of growth and innovation and have the resources to help people access lifelong learning opportunities. It is our hope that this report helps advance the conversation on how cities can help build a lifelong learning system, and in so doing, create a more skilled, competitive, and equitable workforce. Thanks again for joining us today.